The gates of hell were opened when a handful of scientists in 1968 chose to play God. Families were destroyed, homes, villages, entire cities, turning faith into infection, and the father with obsession. Driven by illusions of grandeur, curiosity became arrogance. Arrogance became experimentation, and experimentation became suffering. All sacrificed for one single reason: control over life itself. But viruses do not create evil. They reveal the evil, stripping away the mask and showing us what was always there. Because the darkest monsters were never the ones who mutated, but the ones who chose to be one. And tonight, the monsters rise from hell, not to hide in the shadows, but to be exposed. Can you even imagine what would happen if someone stole your identity? If you were kidnapped, experimented on, forced to wear a face that isn't yours? Between all of these SIMMONS experiments, Sherry Birkin started and experimented on because of her valuable blood, since she was the only known person to survive direct infection with the G virus and actually live. But her survival was never freedom. Trauma turned into the research data, turned into an asset by these monsters for 11 years in a row. At the same time, SIMMONS had Carla RADAMES. She worked for SIMMONS, respected him, and always wanted his approval. Carla became the experiment. Through C-virus experimentation, she physically became Ada, the woman who rejected SIMMONS. Think about that for a second. Looking in the mirror and knowing the person staring back isn't you, but a version of someone who your boss was obsessed with. That's not love or mentorship, that's possession. If Carla became the monster, then SIMMONS was already one. He didn't need a virus. He didn't need to mutate, but he used power, obsession, and people. SIMMONS is a monster who chose to be one. And talking about stealing identities, and given that this video is a list best to the best of best monsters in the franchise, I need to talk about the one family whose identity were taken. And no, I'm not talking about this one. I will talk about you later on. I want to talk about the Bakers. 2017, Dolville, Louisiana. Not every monster begins in a lab. Some begin at home. Jack Baker wasn't born as a titan. He wasn't a mastermind or chasing power. He was a flawed man, alcoholic, a broken man in many ways. He cared about his family. He tried, imperfectly, but he tried. Then Evelyn showed up, and the infection trapped the Baker family. There are moments in Resident Evil 7 where you see the flashes of awareness, like he knows something is wrong, like he's watching himself from the inside, in prison. And for me, this one is the most terrifying when it comes to physically terrifying, because he also needs to mutate, he also needs to be a monster physically. He's just a man, a 6-foot man or so, who is way stronger than Ethan and wants to kill him, follow him throughout the entire house. He doesn't leave him alone. That could be even someone real, perfectly someone real. And then there's the boss fight, which is pretty awesome for me. It's a saw duel, a chainsaw duel, metal against metal, sparks flying, both of you are pushing the blades into each other, until you, with the help of the script, win. Here he is a furious, infected father, Jack Baker at his peak, until now. And then Margaret Baker, absolutely one of the most disgusting bosses in the series for sure. Spider-like. She crawls the walls and starts giving birth there with the honeycomb that is there. But the most twisted thing here is that she is aware of everything without being able to do anything at all, not being able to manipulate her own body that used to be hers. But what if I told you that there is even a worse monster, the most disgusting one? Not even a giant spider or even this swamp monster is as disgusting as this one. The scariest thing in Dolby, Louisiana is the one who smiles, Lucas Baker. Unlike the others, he doesn't feel trapped, he doesn't lose himself, and he doesn't show regret at all. In the files, we're able to find that he enjoys pain from animals and from people. He allows his own friends to stop breathing, let's say, and he didn't do anything because he feels pressure on it. He builds traps, and even out of all the people that Jack Baker finds on the highway, he saves some of them for his own entertainment. He's completely twisted, and when the mold reaches every corner of the Baker house, he doesn't lose himself. He leans into it. He builds traps, recording everything. He had some contact with the Connections, the criminal organization that created Evelyn. They gave him something to stop the full mental control from her. So while the rest of the family was being manipulated, Lucas stayed aware and awake. He wasn't a mindless puppet like the others. He was secretly communicating with the Connections, sending them some data, observing Evelyn, the family, reporting everything. He turned his own home into a testing ground. He was playing his own game. Probably the profile of a sick mind, not broken by trauma or possessed like the others, but someone who enjoys control. Then, just like Simmons, the previous monster, he transforms on purpose, and before that, he wipes out the members of Chris's team without hesitation, enjoying every piece of it, every second, turning the whole operation into another one of his games. While Jack is a father corrupted, Margaret was a mother turned into a hype. Lucas is what happens when a monster is already there and finally just gets permission to evolve and to do what he enjoys the most. He was the real monster of the Bakers, not because of the mold or Evelyn, but because his mind was already broken, twisted, cruel, watching suffering like it's a game. And speaking of minds, if you have seen my first video, you know I talked about the greatest monsters in the entire saga, the mind. Because before the infection, mutations, claws, and teeth, there is always a mind that collapses first. So after you finish this one, you can go watch that one. But now, let's move to the next monster of this video.
Not all hell's life in the earth. Somehow you forget it balance. Who's hiding faces, symbols carved in flesh, chants bleeding through the valley. A satanic cult in sacred ground. Parasites beneath the skin, flesh next to you, faith void within. All things in human flesh, fed by fanatism, by inherited sin, and by absolute control.
What destroyed these kind of monsters was not a virus, it was older than that. Las Plagas, ancient parasites buried beneath stone and history, sleeping under the castle for centuries, waiting. They don't kill you, but they stay with you. They crawl into your nervous system, wrap around your spine, and whisper through your thoughts. You're still awake, breathing, but just not in control. This wasn't an outbreak, it was submission. The villagers didn't become mindless corpses. They knelt and obeyed. Then there was this Salazar bloodline, an old family guarding something ancient beneath their own castle. And when Sadler arrived, he didn't conquer them. He manipulated the family. Ramon Salazar, the last heir, a child raised in isolation and legacy. Sadler gave him purpose, gave him a meaning, and it gave him a gift. And the castle became a cathedral of infection, faith upstairs, experimentation downstairs, a village lost, a bloodline corrupted, and a castle hollowed out by design. And then my favorite monster personally, from the best game in the franchise, Los Guerradores. Because they used to be human too, but out of all of them, they suffered the most. They were prisoners, men locked away in castles, dungeons, criminals, enemies of the cult, anyone who resisted. Las playas were forced into them. Their eyes were burned, sealed shut, metal claws grafted onto their arms, chains wrapped around their torsos. They were kept in darkness, trained to kill by sound, conditioned through pain. They were blind, but not mindless. Every swing of those claws is conditioning. Broken men turned into living weapons. And like you probably noticed in every section of the video, I talk about 3 monsters, 3 people. In the first one, Carl RADAMES, Sherry, Simmons. In the second one, Jack, Margaret, and Lucas. 1 mind, 1 tragedy, 1 monster. And this part is not different, because if the garters represent punishment, then the next creature represents something colder, the regenerators. On the island, the cult stops pretending. No more sermons, just laughs. Metal tables and cult procedures. Multiple plagues implanted into a single piece. And the result is not evolution, but it's instability. They stretch, distort, and just rebuild. You shoot them, they regenerate. You tear them apart and they reform, because the parasites inside keep repairing the damage over and over and over, like something that shouldn't exist. And the Garradors were tortured into weapons. The regenerators were engineered to be unkillable. Faith created one horror. Science created the other. And just quick shout out to my Instagram, where I took all of these pictures that you're watching in the background. All of these pictures were taken by myself. You can watch that either on my X account or my IG account. I'll leave it in the first comment and also in the description so you can watch them. Let's continue. And now the main monster. Just like Simmons was the architect, Lucas was a twisted mind. Here, it was Sadler, Osmond Sadler, the leader of a dark cult guided by Las Plagas. He didn't create chaos, he created devotion, Los Iluminados, robes, chants, rituals. It feels almost like a satanic cult. People kneeling in candlelight, hosts prepared like sacrificial lambs, and that's what they call them, lambs. Los corderitos. And honestly, the first time that I heard the cold chant in Resident Evil 4 remake, that, like the one that is not in the OG RE4, I get chills, because it doesn't sound like just background music, generic music. It sounds like a ritual, like something you're not supposed to hear. And it reminds me to actual music with actual chants like this one, by rituals, militant repetition, the collective devotion of violence. It makes the cult feel disturbingly real, believable. And Los Corderitos, lambs, Ashley wasn't just a hostage, she was a vessel, a political weapon. Infected so the parasites could spread into positions of power. Sadler studied biology. He understood the science behind Las Plagas, but he framed it as divinity. A religion in the village, legacy in the castle, science on the island. All under one mind. He didn't lose control. He made a system out of it. And now, I don't want to scare you guys or anything, but the worst monster behind all of this is real, and he's got a name. Shinji Mikami, the beast behind the corner, the father of Resident Evil, the mind that gave birth to the mansion, virus, and fear, and father of the game that is father of Resident Evil 2. And alongside him, creators like Koji Nakanishi, who at this point has more than earned his place in the DNA of the franchise. If you ever wanted a full video dedicated to either of them, I'll gladly make it. You can just comment either Mikami or Nakanishi, or even just comment both, and I'll make a video for both of them. But speaking of Mikami, Back in Resident Evil 1, and especially in the remake, he created what might be the most tragic monster in the entire series. Orisa Trevor, the final monster of this video. Not all hells live beneath the earth. Some are hidden inside the old mansions, behind the locked doors, secret passages, and the walls built to keep the truth buried. The Spencer Mansion. Her story begins decades before the mansion incident. In 1968, Oswald E. Spencer invited an architect named George Trevor to his estate. Trevor had designed the Spencer Mansion itself, its hidden passages, traps, and secret rooms. Spencer invited him to admire his own creation, so Trevor arrived with his family, his wife, Jessica Trevor, and daughter, Lisa. But it was never a celebration. It was a trap. Spencer couldn't risk the architect knowing too much about the mansion's secrets, so the family disappeared inside the very building Trevor had designed, and George Trevor was imprisoned inside the mansion, forced to wander through the hidden corridors he himself created, starving and alone, eventually dying inside the labyrinth of his own design. But his wife and daughter faced something worse. They were handed to Umbrella, test subjects, used for experiments with the progenitor virus. Jessica Trevor didn't survive the early experiments. She rejected the virus. She died soon after. But Lisa didn't die. Her body adapted. They injected her again, and again, and again. Years of experiments. Her body breaking, rebuilding, mutating, but never dying. For 28 years, Lisa Trevor was kept alive in the darkness of Umbrella Laboratories, an endless cycle of injections, observation, and pain. By 1995, she had already become uncontrollable. 3 researchers were killed by Lisa Trevor during one of her violent outbursts, but Umbrella didn't destroy her. They kept studying her, because Lisa had become something impossible, very capable of resisting the virus itself. Even William Birkin eventually became involved in her research. Another brilliant mind, another man consumed by obsession. In 1998, Birkin attempted something radical. He implanted Lisa with a prototype parasite, a precursor to later bioorganic control systems, hoping it would stabilize her brain and allow researchers to finally control her mutations. But Lisa's body rejected the control. Her immune system attacked the parasite, destroying it, in the process making her mind even more unstable, yet more aware, in a strange way. Umbrella had created something they couldn't dominate, something that refused to die. Lisa Trevor became one of the earliest truly immortal POWs. Her body continued mutating, grotesque tendrils burst from her back, flesh reshaping itself endlessly, and her mind completely shattered. She kept asking the same question: where is my mother? The guards tried to manipulate her. Some even wore her mother's clothes, trying to calm her down, trying to trick her into thinking Jessica Trevor was still alive, but the deception only made things worse. Lisa began attacking the staff, killing guards, and doing something far more disturbing. She started collecting faces, an obsession with it, ripping the faces of her victims and wearing them, trying to recreate the one face she had lost, her mother's. That was the last thing Lisa Trevor remembered: her mother's face, her voice, her warmth. Everything else had been stripped away by decades of experiments, but that memory, that one fragment, refused to die. For 28 years, Umbrella kept Lisa Trevor alive, injecting her with virus after virus, testing the limits of her body, watching how she adapted, how she survived things no human being should survive. She became something impossible, a body that rejected death itself. Even when researchers like William Birkin tried to manipulate her biology, even when the new parasites were introduced into her system, Lisa's body resisted. Her immune system attacked everything. The virus changed her, but it could never truly control her. By the time of the mansion incident in 1998, Lisa Trevor had become a living anomaly, a creature that, Umbrella itself no longer understood. Bullets didn't stop her, fire didn't stop her. Her body regenerated, endlessly adapting. And then came the moment that defines her story. Deep beneath the mansion, Lisa found something. As gold, the remains of her mother, Jessica Trevor. For a brief moment, something inside Lisa remembered. Not rage, violence, but grief, as if holding the only piece of her past that still existed. And then, she threw herself into the abyss beneath the mansion, disappearing into the darkness below. Most people assume that that's the end of Lisa Trevor, but here's the issue. Nothing had ever been able to kill her. Not the virus, parasites, or even the decades of experimentation. She adapted to everything, which means one possibility still lingers in the shadows of RE's lore. Lisa Trevor may still be alive, somewhere beneath the ruins of the Spencer mansion, still wandering, searching, still holding onto the memory of her mother. And Lisa wasn't the last innocent life destroyed by experiments like this, because the same obsession that created her never stopped. Years later, in places far away from the Spencer mansion, the same search for the perfect subject continued. At Rose Hill Hospital, a man named Victor Gideon began conducting his own research. He was looking for something very specific, a human body capable of withstanding new strains of the T virus, a mutation of it, a subject who couldn't die, who could evolve, just like Lisa Trevor. So Gideon brought in new patients, 2 girls, 2 clones, Mary and Emily. Mary's body failed almost immediately. She couldn't stabilize the infection, even after a glimmer of hope, but the virus poured through her cells. But instead of dying, she transformed, mutating into something grotesque, a stalking creature, something unnatural. Another innocent turned into a monster by experimentation, just like Lisa Trevor. In addition to that, the experiment gave her superhuman strength. Before fully transforming, she was even able to rake a hole through her wall of her room, trying to escape, before becoming the grotesque creature we eventually encounter. Driven by cannibalistic instincts, and judging by the second hole we see in the ceiling, it feels like she was trying to reach her friend, maybe trying to see her, to save her before she gets hurt too, with the monsters outside. Not herself, but the other monsters. Emily, on the other hand, responded very differently. Her body responded with severe carrots, slowly taking away her sight. But unlike her friend, Mary, or the other clone treated as nothing more than a disposable experiment, Emily seemed to have a more hopeful outcome. She was saved thanks to Grace's empathy and compassion. Although the infection did turn her into a dangerous creature at one point, a monster that Leon had to protect Grace from, they were eventually able to save Emily as well. In the end, she was cured and later even adopted by Grace, finally giving her something that she never had, a second chance at life, something that very likely no other clone had. And maybe if you think about it, the stalker, the monster, the creature, maybe she only wanted to save Emily. She even put her in a cell where Grace had to save her from, only wanted to keep her safe too, before she also becomes a grotesque monster like she did. Her instincts became feral, cannibalistic. The virus was turning her into something else, until one final moment changed everything. Grace. Someone who refused to let another experiment end in silence. After losing the control of herself, Grace fought back. Defending herself in a desperate act of survival, she used an intense burst of light against her. The light destroying the infected tissue, burning the virus inside her. Her form began to melt, breaking down, liquefying. Molten flesh collapsing under its own mutation. She didn't survive it, but in that moment her suffering finally ended. Grace gave her peace. And when you look at all of these stories, Lisa Trevor, Mary, Emily, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. None of them chose to become monsters. They were taken, used, broken by people who believed they were building the future. Scientists chasing evolution, Researchers obsessed with control, men like Oswald D. Spencer, William Birkin, like Victor Gideon, all convinced they were creating something greater. But in the end, they weren't creating cats, they were creating tragedies, because the worst monsters were never the creatures born in the labs. They were the ones standing behind the glass, choosing to become one. Umbrella didn't create evolution, they created suffering, all in the name of progress, all in the name of control. In the end, the worst monsters were always the one who chose to become one.